"Just make it quick," she said. The cowboy saw her wounds and promised, "This won't go unpunished." The wind howled, a malevolent spirit twisting the sand into a blinding fury. It wasn't a dust storm, it was the West itself, angry and unforgiving, trying to swallow me whole. The sun, a pale, bruised orb, bled through the murk, casting long, grotesque shadows that writhed and writhed across the desolate expanse. I clutched the faded photograph in my hand, my brother's laughing face, forever frozen in a moment of peace that had long since abandoned me. I had been tracking his ghost for weeks, following faint whispers and fainter trails, but the desert offered no solace, only the bitter taste of regret and the gnawing certainty that I was too late. This land held its secrets tight, buried under layers of forgotten sins and the skeletal remains of men who had dared to hope. I was one of them, a man chasing a shadow, but something in the wind, a sound that cut through the roaring sand, made me stop. It was a soft, choked whimper, a fragile sound of pain that the storm couldn't quite erase. It was the sound of a living thing being broken, and my blood ran cold with a fear that had nothing to do with the storm. I moved toward the sound, a knot of dread tightening in my gut, my hand instinctively going to the Colt at my hip, a useless gesture of bravado against a world that had forgotten what mercy was. If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away. And if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming. The whimper led me to a decrepit lean-to, a skeletal structure of sun-bleached wood and ripped canvas, barely standing against the onslaught of the wind. Inside, crumpled against a stack of crates like a discarded doll, lay Alara Stone. Even in the gloom, her presence was striking, a stark contradiction to the desolate landscape. She was a woman known throughout the territory, not for her beauty, though she possessed a fierce, unconventional kind, but for her skill and ruthlessness as a bounty hunter. She was a legend, a ghost in the vast, lawless expanse of the Wild West, a woman who could track a man through hell and bring him back in chains. But the woman before me was no legend. She was a broken human being. Her leather duster, a symbol of her trade and her independence, was torn and stained with dark splotches. Her usually keen, steady eyes, the color of a stormy sky, were wide with a terror that I had never seen in any man. Her long dark hair, usually a disciplined braid, was matted and tangled, filled with dust and debris from what must have been a desperate struggle. When she heard my footsteps crunching on the sand and wood scraps, her head snapped up, and a raw, guttural gasp escaped her lips. She didn't see a man. She saw a wolf, a predator closing in for the kill. Her body, trembling with exhaustion and pain, tried to retreat, dragging itself a few inches across the dusty floor before collapsing. "Please," she rasped, her voice a thin whisper of agony. Just make it quick. Don't make it last like they did." The word struck me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole my breath. In that single, heartbreaking plea, I understood everything. Her terror wasn't born of the moment. It was the echo of a nightmare she had just lived through, a trauma so profound it had broken her will to live. My own jaw clenched with a murderous fury so cold and absolute, it felt like an icicle in my chest. Who were they? The question echoed in my mind, a vow for a woman I didn't even know. A woman who, in her brokenness, was more human than anyone I had ever encountered in this unforgiving land. I took a step back, my hands raised in a universal gesture of peace. "No, ma'am," I said, my voice barely a whisper against the wind's roar. "I'm not here to hurt you. I came to help." Her eyes, swollen and bruised, remained locked on me, wild with a hopeless fear. She was waiting for me to turn, to reveal the true monster beneath the facade of kindness, just as the others must have. I could see the fresh bruises blooming on her arms and throat, the deep scratches that spoke of a desperate, futile fight. Her spirit was broken in a way that no physical wound could ever compare to. It was the sight of her, a warrior brought to her knees, that solidified my resolve. I had come looking for my brother, but I had found a purpose I hadn't known I needed. My brother was a ghost, a memory, but this woman was real. She was here, alive, and she needed me. I slowly took off my hat, setting it on the ground, a sign of respect and vulnerability. "My name is Lucas Blackwood," I said, my voice as gentle as I could make it. "I was tracking through here and heard you. I give you my word. I will not harm you." Her fear slowly morphed into confusion, a subtle shift in the dark pools of her eyes as she grappled with the concept of a stranger's kindness. They hurt me," she whispered, the simple words a torrent of pain. The rage I had felt earlier flared again, but I forced myself to keep my voice calm, controlled. "I can see that, Miss Stone, and I'm sorry it happened. It was wrong. But whoever did this to you, they're going to pay for it. That's a promise." I didn't know who they were or what I would have to do, but in that moment, under the bruised, angry sky of the West, I committed myself. I had been a man without a purpose, a ghost chasing a ghost. Now, I had a cause, a woman who had been brought to her knees by evil, and a promise to see justice served. As the dust settled and the wind began to soften, a strange and fragile hope took root. From this moment of profound despair, I knew a new kind of story would begin. A story not of vengeance, but of healing. A Wild West love story born from a battlefield of sorrow. I felt her trembling body, and I knew that this wasn't just about justice. It was about protecting something beautiful and fragile in a world that sought to destroy it. I knelt, slowly, cautiously, not as a threat, but as an anchor. "Ilara," I said, her name feeling natural on my lips for the first time. "I promise you, you are safe now. I will not leave you." Her gaze finally met mine, and for the first time I saw not just fear, but a flicker of a nascent, desperate hope. And in that moment, I knew I had found not just a mission, but something far more profound. Ayana, now Ilara, looked at me with a confusion that ran deeper than her fear. She had been found by an enemy, a white man in a world that had taught her to trust no one outside her own kind. "Why? Why are you helping me?" she asked, the words thin and fragile. I considered my answer for a moment. It wasn't about saving a life, it was about saving her humanity. "Because it's right," I said simply. "And because the men who did this need to face justice." A bitter laugh escaped her lips, a harsh sound that tore at my heart. "Justice? There is no justice for women like me. Not out here." Her words, born from a lifetime of witnessing cruelty, hit me hard. I tightened my jaw, a fresh determination solidifying in my soul. "Not while I'm breathing," I said, the words a quiet promise that would shape both our futures. "They can't." I rowed her back to my cabin, a humble structure I had built myself. It sat nestled in a hidden valley, away from the prying eyes of town. I could feel her tension, her body rigid with fear as we approached my home. She was terrified of being alone with me, a man she had just met, in a place no one else knew about. I felt her anxiety and stopped the horse well before we reached the front door. "You'll have the bedroom," I said, my voice gentle and reassuring. "I'll sleep in the barn until you feel safe." The simple gesture, a gift of privacy and security without any expectation, was a crack in her wall of fear. I showed her the bedroom, a simple room with a bed and a small table, and then handed her a loaded shotgun. Her eyes widened in surprise, a flicker of something beyond terror passing through them. "Your safety is more important than anything else," I said, a truth that felt as absolute as the sun setting on the horizon. "If anyone tries to get in, anyone, including me, you shoot first and ask questions later." She held the gun, the cold steel, a strange comfort in her trembling hands. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Men aren't kind to women like me. Why are you?" I paused at the door, turning to face her. "Not all men are like those animals," I said firmly. "Some of us believe women deserve protection and respect, regardless of who they are." I looked at her, at the woman who had been broken but not destroyed. "What happened to you was evil, but it doesn't define you. You're still whole inside." The first week was a careful dance, a silent negotiation of fear and trust. She kept herself locked in the bedroom, venturing out only when she was sure I was working far from the cabin. I would leave food on the porch for her, a gesture of sustenance without demand. She would pick at the food, a silent acknowledgement of her existence. I heard her nightmares from the barn, the choked cries and desperate pleas that drove a knife of rage deeper into my heart each night. I checked on her every morning, looking for the small signs of life, the smoke from the fireplace, the movement at the window, the empty plates on the porch. I would speak to her through the door, my voice soft and steady, letting her know I was there, an invisible anchor in her storm of emotions. "Ilara," I would say gently, "I'm going to check the horses now. I'll be back before dark." Simple words, a quiet rhythm of reassurance that slowly, painstakingly, began to penetrate her wall of terror. On the seventh day, a sound from the cabin made my heart stop. It wasn't a cry of pain, but a scream of pure, present terror. I burst through the door to find her backed into a corner, her eyes wide with a panic that had nothing to do with me. She was staring at a tree branch scratching against the window in the wind. "They're coming back," she gasped, her body shaking. I heard them outside. I looked at the innocent branch, then at her terrified face, and my heart broke. She was so lost in her trauma that the lines between reality and memory had blurred. "It's just a tree branch," I said softly, my voice calm and steady, like I would use with a spooked horse. "You're safe. No one is coming." But she couldn't hear me over the roar of her own fear. In that moment, I did something I had never done before. I began to sing, an old song my mother had sung to me during storms, a gentle melody that cut through the panic in a way words couldn't. Slowly, her breathing calmed, and her wild eyes focused on my face instead of the imaginary threats. That moment was the first crack in the wall between us. It was a shared moment of vulnerability, a silent agreement that we were no longer just a victim and her savior, but two people bound by a shared understanding of pain. The thunder sounded like their laughter, and the storm outside mirrored the one raging inside her soul. She came to me, to the main room, seeking refuge not just from the weather, but from the ghosts of her past. "Please," she had gasped, "I can't be alone." The admission cost her everything, but it was the first step toward healing. I made a fire, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold fear that clung to her. We sat in silence for a long time, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the drumming of the rain. "I built this cabin myself," I said, my voice steady. "Took me the better part of a year. That stone fireplace nearly killed me. Rebuilt it 6 times before I got it right." It was a story of a struggle, a journey, and in telling it, I gave her a piece of myself. She began to ask questions, her voice hesitant at first, then gaining strength as she spoke more words at once than she had since I'd found her. She was curious, and in her curiosity, she was no longer a victim, but a person with a story of her own to tell. We talked for hours that night, sharing pieces of our lives, our losses, our reasons for being alone. She learned about my brother, about the ghost I was chasing. I learned about her, the bounty hunter who had lost everything but her will to survive. She saw my past, and I saw her present. We found common ground in the vast loneliness of our lives, and in that shared space, a fragile bond began to form. As the storm passed and dawn broke, both of us knew something had fundamentally changed between us. She was still wounded, still afraid, but she was no longer alone. She had found someone who saw her not as a broken victim, but as a person worth protecting, and that made all the difference in the world. The trust was fragile, like morning dew on a spider's web, but it was real. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here. It was 3 weeks to the day since I had found her. The fragile trust between us had blossomed into something more solid, a quiet understanding that didn't need words. We were sharing breakfast on the porch, the air crisp and clean after a night of rain, when I finally broached the subject that had been a constant, burning question in my mind. "Ilara," I said carefully, setting my coffee cup down and looking at her seriously, "I need to ask about that day. About the men who hurt you. If we're going to find them and make them pay, I need details." I saw her go pale, a flicker of the old fear returning to her eyes. "Only what you can bear to tell me," I quickly added, my voice gentle. She stared at the horizon, where the morning sun was just beginning to shimmer. There were 3 of them, she said finally, her voice steady but distant. 2 young, maybe 25. The third was older, had a gray beard and scars on his hands. He was their leader. I could see the memory, a clear and terrible thing, etched on her face. I knew the cost of her remembering, but I also saw the determination for justice in her eyes. Can you describe them more? I asked, my voice purposeful. Clothing, horses, anything to help me track them. The leader rode a black horse with white markings, she said, her voice gaining strength as she recalled the details. He wore a cavalry hat, but no uniform. One of the younger men had red hair and freckles and spoke with a thick accent. The third was thin, nervous, kept looking around like he expected to be caught. Her hands, which had been steady, began to tremble as she recalled the darkest part of the memory. They said things while She stopped, unable to continue. I waited patiently, my jaw clenched with controlled fury. They talked about other women they'd hurt, she whispered, the words barely audible. Apache, Mexican, it didn't matter. Said I was just the latest, that no one would believe a woman who had lost her way. The rage built in my chest, a physical pressure. They were wrong, I said quietly. The words a silent prayer and a solemn vow. Someone does care, and someone is definitely coming for them. I looked at her, and for the first time since I'd found her, I saw something beyond the pain. I saw a warrior rising from the ashes of her own defeat. There's something else, she said, her voice growing stronger, a new fire in her eyes. I want to come with you when you track them down. I want to be there when you confront them. I immediately started to object, but she cut me off, her voice firm and resolute. I need to face them, Lucas. This is not just about justice, it's about healing. I looked at her, seeing not the broken victim I had found weeks ago, but a woman discovering her own strength. Tracking dangerous men isn't for healing, Ilara, I said, my voice carrying the weight of my own past as a man of the law. It's something you do for justice, and justice can be ugly and violent. I won't put you in that danger. Her eyes blazed with a fierce determination that took my breath away. I'm already in danger, she replied firmly. Every day I spend afraid of shadows, seeing their faces in my nightmares. That's the danger I'm living with. The only way to end it is to look them in the eyes and show them they didn't destroy me. I studied her face, seeing the woman I had come to admire and, in a way I was only just beginning to understand, to love. If you come, you follow my lead completely, I said, the words a silent acceptance of her plea. No arguments. These men are killers. She nodded solemnly, her conviction unwavering. I understand, she said, but I won't hide anymore. I won't let them win by making me too afraid to fight back. A day later, we began our hunt. The trail was cold, but I was an expert tracker, and Ilara, a bounty hunter in her own right, had a keen eye for detail. Reading a sign isn't just footprints, I explained to her, showing her the disturbed earth where she had been left. It's understanding the story the ground tells you. She absorbed each lesson with an intensity that spoke of a deep-seated desire for vengeance and healing. We rode north, following a trail weeks old but still readable, moving fast but not panicked. They felt safe, probably figured no one would come looking for a woman they had left for dead. Their casual cruelty, their arrogance, fueled my determination to prove them wrong, permanently. As we followed the trail, Ilara struggled with waves of emotion. Every mile brought fresh anxiety, but also a growing purpose she hadn't felt since before the attack. I keep expecting to fall apart, she confided, as we made camp our first night. But you haven't, I pointed out, admiring her resilience. You've gotten stronger every day. That takes courage most people don't possess. The trail led through 3 small towns, each stop providing new pieces of the puzzle. In Red River Station, a bartender remembered 3 men bragging about taming a wildcat. In Crossroads, a store clerk recalled selling ammunition to a bearded man with scarred hands, who paid with unusual silver coins. They're not even trying to hide, I observed grimly. They think they're untouchable. But their third day brought a setback. While questioning a saloon girl in Willow Bend, Ilara overheard two cowboys laughing and saying the same things her attackers had said. The conversation sent her into a panic attack so severe I had to carry her outside. They were saying the same things, she gasped, laughing about it the same way those men laughed about me. I felt my heart break, watching weeks of progress unravel in a matter of moments. "I can't do this," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Maybe they were right. Maybe I am just an object to be used. Her despair cut me like a knife, threatening to destroy everything we had built together. This was the moment that would either break us both or forge us into something stronger than either of us could be alone. "Hey there. Friend, take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. It's easy to forget, but staying hydrated is crucial for your health. Also, if you've been sitting for a while, do a quick lap around the room and give your eyes a break from the screen. Your body will thank you." I knelt beside her in that dusty alley, the setting sun casting long, desperate shadows. Her struggle was a raw, visceral thing, and I felt utterly helpless. "Look at me," I said softly, waiting until her eyes, wild with panic, met mine. "Those men are ignorant fools whose opinions don't matter. What matters is that you survived something terrible, and you're strong enough to be here, fighting for justice." But her question, filled with a profound and aching vulnerability, cut through my words. "But what if they're right?" she whispered. "What if I'm fooling myself, thinking I can ever be whole again?" The question wasn't just about the men, it was about a deeper battle, a war against the voice inside her telling her she was damaged beyond repair. I was quiet for a long moment, choosing my words carefully. I had watched her, every day, for over a month. I had seen her fight nightmares, face down her fears, and grow stronger despite everything trying to break her. "Ilara," I said, my voice filled with a conviction that came from my heart. "The woman I see isn't broken. She's a warrior who's been through hell and emerged stronger. You see yourself as a victim, but I see a survivor." She looked at me, a flicker of something in her eyes I couldn't quite decipher. "You see me differently because you care about me," she said, the words a quiet observation, "and that makes your opinion less trustworthy, not more." I stood and offered her my hand, which she took after a moment's hesitation. "Come with me," I said. "I want to show you something." I pulled out a small leather journal from my satchel, its pages filled with my careful handwriting. "I've been keeping a record of our journey. Not just the trail, but your progress, your healing, your strength." I handed her the journal. "Read what I've written about you." She read page after page of my observations, a chronicle of her slow, difficult journey back to herself. Day 12, Ilara spoke without flinching when I approached. Day 18, she told me about her grandmother's teachings. Day 23, she stood up to that merchant who tried to cheat her. The entries painted a picture of gradual but consistent recovery, a silent testament to her strength. "This is who you really are, Ilara," I said when she finished reading. "Not some broken victim, but a healer, a survivor, a woman strong enough to track her attackers across hundreds of miles. Yes, I care about you, but that doesn't make me blind to the truth." She looked up at me, something approaching wonder in her eyes. "You really believe I can do this? Face them and come out stronger?" I nodded firmly. "I believe you can do anything you set your mind to," I said, "but more importantly, you need to believe it too." Lent. As we prepared to continue, Ilara felt something shift inside her chest. Not sudden healing, but a steady determination to see this through, regardless of the cost. The men who'd hurt her had taken enough. She wouldn't let them take her courage, too. The trail was growing warmer, and both of us sensed we were closing in on our quarry. But neither of us suspected our next discovery would force us to confront not just her attackers, but the very nature of justice itself. Our hunt was about to become something far more dangerous and complex than either of us had imagined, testing not only our courage, but our growing love for each other. The town of Dustfall Creek squatted in the desert like a wound on the earth, its weathered buildings and hostile atmosphere making it clear this was where decent people didn't linger. As we rode down the main street, we drew stares ranging from curious to openly hostile. "Easy," I murmured, sensing her tension. "We're just asking questions, nothing more." But I kept my hand near my gun and my eyes on the shadows where threats might hide. This was exactly where men like Ilara's attackers would feel at home. Our first stop was the saloon, dim and reeking of stale beer and broken dreams. The bartender looked us over with calculating suspicion. "We don't serve strangers in here," he said flatly, his eyes resting on Ilara's determined face. "She's with me," I said quietly, my voice a low, dangerous warning that made the bartender reconsider. "We're looking for 3 men who passed through a few weeks ago. One older with a gray beard, 2 younger. They had silver coins to spend." The bartender's expression shifted, and I caught the flicker of recognition before he could hide it. "Don't know nothing about no 3 men," he said, but his eyes betrayed him. Ilara stepped forward, her voice steady despite the hostile atmosphere. The older man had scars on his hands and rode a black horse with white markings. They were traveling north from the Badlands. She watched his face carefully, noting how his jaw tightened at her description. "Like I said, don't know nothing," the bartender repeated, but his nervous glance toward the back room told a different story. I filed the information away. We were definitely on the right track. Our investigation continued through the town's few businesses, each stop yielding small pieces that built a picture of our quarry's recent activities. The stable owner remembered shoeing a black horse with a distinctive marking. The store clerk recalled 3 men buying supplies, paying with silver coins, and boasting about recent good fortune. "They're not trying to hide," I observed grimly. "They think they're untouchable, that no one will challenge them." But our conversation with the town's prostitute, a worn woman named Mary who agreed to talk behind the laundry, provided the breakthrough we'd been seeking. "Those 3 you're asking about?" she said nervously. "They were here 2 weeks ago, throwing money around like they'd struck gold." "What did they say about where they got the money?" I asked, though I suspected I knew. Mary's expression darkened with disgust. "They bragged about teaching some bounty hunter her place, said they'd taken payment in silver for services rendered. Made me sick the way they talked." Ilara felt bile rise as she realized her attackers had been paid for assaulting her. "Paid by whom?" she asked, her voice barely controlled. Mary shook her head. "Didn't say, but they mentioned meeting their employer again soon. Something about a big job that would make them rich." As we processed this disturbing information, the pieces of a larger puzzle clicked into place. Her attack hadn't been random violence. It had been a paid assault, part of some larger scheme involving significant money and careful planning. The implications were staggering and infinitely more dangerous than we had imagined. If you're watching on TV, don't hesitate, grab your phone and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters. That night, camped outside Dustfall Creek, Ilara and I tried to make sense of what we'd learned. The revelation that her attack had been a paid assault rather than random violence changed everything about our quest. "Someone hired them to hurt me specifically," Ilara said, her voice hollow with shock. "But why?" "I'm just a bounty hunter." I paced around our fire, my mind working through the possibilities. Maybe it wasn't about her personally. Maybe it was about sending a message to the other bounty hunters, or creating fear among those who sought to bring law to this lawless land. As we talked through her recent jobs, a troubling possibility emerged. Ilara had been tracking a notorious gang of outlaws who were known to be on the payroll of a powerful figure in the region, a man named Silas Thorne. Thorne was a land speculator and a political power broker, a man who built his fortune on fear and manipulation. He had a reputation for eliminating anyone who got too close to his operations. Ilara's last job had been to bring in one of his lieutenants, a man who held the keys to his illegal land deals and his corruption. The timing, I realized grimly, was no coincidence. "He wanted me out of the way," she said slowly, the realization dawning on her. "He didn't just want me hurt, he wanted me broken, silenced. He orchestrated this whole thing to scare me off the trail." I felt my stomach tighten as the implications became clear. We weren't just hunting 3 violent men. We were potentially threatening a powerful figure who had orchestrated her attack as part of a larger political scheme. "We're in over our heads," Ilara said quietly. "If this is true, Thorne has money, connections, probably political protection. What can 2 people do against that kind of power?" I looked at her across the fire, seeing not the broken victim I'd found, but a woman who had grown strong enough to face impossible odds. "We can do what's right," I said simply. "We can expose the truth and make sure those responsible face justice, no matter how powerful they think they are." "It won't be easy," she warned, "and it might get us both killed." I smiled grimly. "I've been in dangerous situations before," I said, "but this time I won't be facing them alone." The promise in my words went beyond our shared quest for justice, touching on feelings that had been growing between us, despite the circumstances. As we prepared for sleep, both of us knew the next phase would test not just our courage, but our faith in each other. 3 days later, we finally tracked our quarry to a ramshackle saloon outside Dustfall Creek. Through the grimy window, we could see the 3 men exactly as Ilara had described them: the gray-bearded leader with scarred hands, the red-haired man, and the thin, nervous one. "There they are," Ilara whispered, her voice steady despite the magnitude of this moment. Weeks of tracking, healing, and growing stronger had led to this confrontation. I studied the scene carefully. "They're drunk, which makes them dangerous but sloppy," I murmured. "There are other people in the saloon, witnesses, if we do this right." I looked at Ilara with concern. "Are you ready for this? Once we walk through that door, there's no going back." Ilara's answer surprised me with its strength. "I've been ready since the day you found me," she said, her eyes blazing with determination. "These men took my innocence, my peace, my trust in the world, but they didn't take my courage, and they didn't break my spirit. If you've made it this far, I know you're a true fan of WWL. From the bottom of my heart, I wish your day is filled with health and happiness, and may a little stroke of luck find you in the next 15 minutes. Don't forget to share it with me in the comments." We entered the saloon together. I spotted our quarry drinking at a corner table, laughing about something that made my stomach turn. Ilara's sharp intake of breath confirmed these were indeed her attackers. But when I looked at her, I saw no fear, only a righteous anger that matched my own. "You," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet saloon. The 3 men looked up, and I saw recognition and panic flicker across their faces as they realized their victim had tracked them down. "Remember me?" she continued, walking forward with a dignity that commanded every person's attention. The bearded leader tried to bluster his way out. "Don't know what you're talking about, little girl." But his companions were already reaching for their guns, and my reflexes kicked in with deadly precision. "I wouldn't," I said quietly, my weapon appearing with practiced speed. "There are a dozen witnesses here, and everyone is about to hear exactly what you 3 did to this woman." Ilara stepped forward, no longer the broken victim they'd left in the desert, but a strong woman demanding justice. "Tell them," she said to the bearded man, her voice steady and clear. "Tell everyone here what you did to a bounty hunter, and about the man who hired you." The man's face contorted with rage and fear as he realized his crimes were about to be exposed. "Shut your mouth, you lying," he snarled, lunging toward Ilara with a hidden knife. My shot was precise and final, dropping the man before he could reach her. The other 2 attackers were quickly subdued by the angry crowd. "It's over," I said quietly to Ilara, as we looked at the scene. The leader's body still, his companions bound and awaiting trial. The patrons of the saloon stood in silent awe, a newfound respect in their eyes. They had stood up for her dignity. She looked at the resolution of her nightmare, and felt a peace she hadn't experienced since the attack. "Thank you, Lucas," she said, her eyes bright with tears that were no longer from pain, but from healing. "You kept your promise." We left the saloon together, walking out into the late afternoon Sunday. The town, once a symbol of the corruption we had fought against, now felt different. It was a place where justice, however fleeting, had prevailed. We stood at the edge of town, looking out at the open expanse of the west. The road stretched out before us, a long, winding path into the unknown. We had avenged her, brought them to justice, but we hadn't found my brother. The trail, it seemed, was endless. Ilara looked at me, her eyes a mix of gratitude and a new, hopeful light. "What now?" she asked. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile for the first time in a long, long time. "We ride," I said. "We ride, and we see what the West has for us. A new trail, a new beginning. She nodded, her hand finding mine. "Wherever you go, I'm with you," she said. We mounted our horses, leaving Dustfall Creek behind, and rode out into the sunset. The cowboy love stories were out there somewhere, waiting to be written. This was not the end. It was the beginning of our Wild West love story, a testament to the power of healing and the promise of a future filled with a different kind of freedom, a Wild West love like no other. Today's story is about pains that seemed to have no way out until a small ray of light changed everything. Do you believe that, even in the darkest times, there's always a miracle waiting at the end of the road? And if deep down you still believe that God is watching over you, quietly arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment AMEN below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write it, a blessing may quietly find its way into your life. Her husband hit her in the street. The cowboy stepped in and said, "Not as long as I live." The dust of Serenity Creek, Arizona territory, tasted like blood and shame. The afternoon sun, relentless and unforgiving, burned down on Eleanor Vance as she staggered back, her vision blurred by a veil of crimson that trickled from a gash above her eye. The year was 1881. And in this desolate patch of frontier land, a woman's pain was often seen as her husband's private business. Eleanor, at just 22, had learned this bitter truth through 3 years of marriage that had twisted from a hopeful beginning into a daily torment of fear and violence. She knew she should have stayed silent, but the bitter words, a defense of her own shattered dignity, had slipped out, and now she was paying the price. Her husband, Silas Thorne, stood over her, his face a mask of drunken fury, his large frame swaying slightly as he raised his fist again. "You dare to talk back to me in front of these people? I swear to God I'll teach you a lesson you won't forget." The words were slurred, thick with cheap whiskey and venom. Eleanor scrambled on the ground, her worn calico dress now a mess of dirt and blood, her long dark hair having come loose from its bun. "Please, Silas," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. She was acutely aware of the townsfolk who had stopped their business to watch, their eyes either curious or quickly averted. No one would intervene. The unspoken rule in Serenity Creek was simple: a man's domain, a man's wife, a man's business. Silas lunged forward, his powerful hand clamping around her arm with a force that threatened to shatter bone. "Get up. You think I'm done with you? If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away. And if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming." His cruel laughter echoed in the sudden silence of the street. It was the laugh of a predator who knows its prey has nowhere to run. Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut, preparing for the inevitable blow, but it never came. Instead, a voice, calm and steady, cut through the tension like a keen blade. "Let her go." Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. A tall, imposing silhouette stood against the setting sun, his broad shoulders seeming to block out the harsh light. He stepped forward, and as he moved, she could make out the details. A dark, wide-brimmed hat, the worn-out, faded blue of a denim shirt, and eyes that held the cold, hard, and brilliant hue of a winter sky. A stranger, she had never seen him before. He had the quiet, deliberate way of a man who knew his own power and was not afraid to use it. The hand resting on his holstered revolver was a casual, almost lazy gesture, yet it held a certain promise of danger. "This ain't your concern, mister," Silas snarled, his grip on Eleanor's arm tightening painfully. The stranger's boots kicked up small clouds of dust as he closed the distance between them. When a man beats a woman in the street, it becomes everyone's concern. His voice was low, carrying no trace of emotion, but its controlled power sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. "Let her go. Now." Silas let out a harsh, contemptuous laugh. "Or what? This is my wife. I'll handle her how I please." The stranger's expression remained unchanged, his gaze never wavering from Silas's eyes. "Not while I'm breathing." Those 4 words hung in the air, a final, unyielding challenge. The crowd of onlookers, which had grown with the passing minutes, fell completely silent. The only sound was the far-off clinking of a blacksmith's hammer and the wind whistling through the dry, high desert air. Eleanor felt her heart pounding against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and a new, bewildering emotion. Hope. No one had ever stood up for her before, not against Frank. She didn't know whether to feel grateful or terrified at what might happen next. She couldn't bring herself to run. This was happening to her, and she was frozen in place. Silent